Καλημέρα σας και από μένα, αγαπητοί κυρίες και κύριοι συνάδελφοι, αγαπητοί κυρίες και κύριοι. Έχουμε την επόμενη συνεδρία μας, που είναι μια συνεδρία επιλεγμένης διάλεξης με προσκεκλημένο τον καθηγητή Ματιό Αλέ από το Παρίσι. Είναι ένας καθηγητής ιδιαίτερα διακεκριμένος στον τομέα της φλεγμονώδους εντεροπάθειας. Έχει την έδρα του πλέον αποβιώσαντος καθηγητού Μάρκ Λεμάν. Έχει βασικές σπουδές και κλινικές σπουδές. Έχει μεταβεί στο Mount Sinai στην Αμερική για 2 χρόνια και έχει κάνει βασική έρευνα στην ανοσοβιολογία. Όπως γνωρίζετε, το Mount Sinai είναι μια ειδική τοποθεσία για όσους ασχολούνται με τα φλεγμονώδη, γιατί εκεί ο Μπάριλ Μπέρναρτ Κρόν την 3η δεκαετία του προηγούμενου αιώνα περιέγραψε για πρώτη φορά την ομώνυμη νόσο. Και έχουμε τη χαρά να έχουμε έναν άνθρωπο ο οποίος είναι και στο Διοικητικό Συμβούλιο της Ευρωπαϊκής Γαστρεντερολογικής Εταιρείας και στο Διοικητικό Συμβούλιο της Ευρωπαϊκής Εταιρείας για τη Φλεγμονώδη Νοσήματα και στην Επιστημονική Επιτροπή της ίδιας εταιρείας, αλλά είναι και μέλος του ZETED, που είναι μια ομάδα, όπως γνωρίζετε, για τη φλεγμονώδη πάθηση των εντέρων στη Γαλλία. Έχει σπουδές και μάστερ και στην βασική βιολογία και στην ανοσολογία. Dear Professor Allais, cher Mathieu, de la part de la comité des organisateurs, des collègues et les participants de cet événement scientifique, je vous souhaite un séjour agréable à Athènes et je vous présente nos sentiments les meilleurs et nos remerciements les plus profonds. Dear Professor Allais, dear Mathieu, I would like to invite you now to take the floor and present us your topic on old and new biologic. The fight goes on. Thank you.
Kalimera. That's all. I will not say any more words in English. I could speak in French. Thanks for the introduction in French. I'm very pleased to be here. I would like to thank the organization and especially Nikos Viazis for this very kind invitation and the great time I spent yesterday and today, especially this morning in the Acropolis Museum and at lunch yesterday with Makis, and we had a great lunch. Okay, so I don't know who gave me the title, but I like very much the title. Old and new biologics, the fight goes on. So if we, these are my conflict of interest. So what are the biologics? There is no fight yet. There is no fight because, in fact, we use anti-TNF, and the other biologics are not really available. But there will be a fight. I don't know what will be the fight, actually. That's interesting. So we have anti-TNF. We have infliximab that we've been using for more than 10 years now. Biosimilars, which are coming. Adalimumab, certolizumab pegol, not on the market, but efficient. Golimumab coming soon. And new biologics with new mechanism of action, and there will be more biologics, and maybe new ways of treating patients, not only targeting the immune system, but I will focus my talk on the immune system because it's where we have the most efficient drugs. So just if we go back to what we tell to our patient every day, if we explain the disease, we can tell to the patient that they have inflammation in a segment of their bowel, and this inflammation is correlated with macroscopic lesions. If we take biopsies, we see that there is an excessive activation of the immune system. And we know from animal models, and the global knowledge is that there is a kind of disruption of tolerance of the immune system towards the bacteria which are in the gut. And these events occur under susceptibility, genes susceptibility, and environmental factors that we are not really able to discover, even if there is clearly a knowledge about the role of the macrobiota and the importance of food. And I think the talk before was just about the importance of food. I didn't understand a word, but I just saw food map. In fact, we have learned on the last 20 years that it is more complex than just what I just said. There is clearly an excessive activation of the immune system, but the primary events are probably in the epithelium. So there are epithelial abnormalities. We know that from Note 2, Card 15. There is abnormalities in innate immunity. We know that from Note 2, Card 15, but for also many genes, defects in innate immunity towards the bacteria especially. There are microbial factors, dysbiosis, and there is also excessive adaptive immune responses. And if we take biopsies, again, what we see on surgical specimen or on biopsies, that clearly there is a T-cell accumulation in the lamina propria. A T-cell accumulation, and these cells are key players. There are also other immune cells innate cells, macrophages, dendritic cells, it's clear. But there is an accumulation of T cells. And these cells produce cytokines. They can also be cytotoxic. They can produce damage in the mucosa through cytokine productions like TNF, but it may also produce by other cell types. And this T cell accumulation is a very important event. It is related to several events before. The fact that there is accumulation of effector memory T cells because they resist to apoptosis. Normally, when a cell is activated, then at some point, these same cells go to apoptosis. But now, they resist to apoptosis in the context of inflammatory bowel disease. There is also sustained T cell cycling, that these cells continue to cycle, even if they normally should stop. And there is an enhanced recruitment of T cells from the blood, from the endothelium. And this will be clearly different mechanism of actions. You see that biologics can target cytokines. They can target recruitment of cells within the mucosa. They can also, that will be for future treatment, target T cell activation, T cell pathways of activation. Immunosuppressants also are efficient, like thiopurines, and they may play a role in changing the resistance, for example, to T cell apoptosis or inhibiting T cell cycling. So what are our objectives when we treat IBD patients? First, of course, is to maintain the remission, to decrease hospitalization and surgery, to prevent complications, not only the complications induced by the disease, but also the complications which could be related to the treatments that we use. And it is really a concern for us, but it's more a concern for our patients. And we want also globally to improve their quality of life. We know that the disease is a progressing disease. This is for Crohn's disease. This is somehow also true for ulcerative colitis. We know that patients have experienced periods with clinical symptoms, like a first attack, a relapse. But we have learned also that, in fact, the disease is not only progressing when people have symptoms. In fact, in periods without symptoms, the disease can still progress, because the inflammatory progress can still destroy the mucosa, the wall. And in fact, you can have development of strictures, fistula abscesses leading to surgery, and then recurrence leading to other complications, and then surgery. So it's a cycle. So the idea is to, it's a concept that maybe we should think about treating early, because we know that if we treat early, we have better results, and to try to avoid this kind of progression of mucosal and tissue damage. This is a whole slide that I've been using many, many times in my talk, and I think we should use it in our daily life when we see patients. These are fears which are expressed by the patients. I will not go through all of them. Some of them are quite important. I would like again to mention the fact that patients are afraid of side effects due to their medication. Sometimes they are more afraid by these potential complications related to the treatments than by the disease itself. So that's why we need to communicate. What are the benefits of the drugs we have been using? There are not so many data showing that, in fact, we are doing well. It's not so easy to show. Here it's a slide from a study from northern France, a population-based study, showing that children exposed to thiopurines had less chance to go to surgery, and they went finally to surgery, but later. So the disease is slowed, but still patients need surgery. You know very well this slide. Well, the oldest know very well this slide. We saw it in the late 90s. It was a very impressive data from the study from Targan here, showing that just one infusion of infliximab could induce a response in 81% of patients. And even in our clinical experience, it's even better than that. We have learned how is the best use to use this anti-TNF. And here with infliximab, data from the SONIC study, showing that combination therapy in patients who were not exposed previously to immunosuppressants or anti-TNF is quite efficient. This is the rate of steroid-free remission, 56% at 6 months, doing better than infliximab alone or thiopurines alone. We have some data suggesting that if you treat early, you have better results. Here it's data from CHARM, and we have also from PRECISE with certolizumab pegol, the same kind of data, showing that if patients were treated with adalimumab less than 2 years after the diagnosis, the results were much better as opposed to patients who were treated later in the course of their disease. So in clinical practice, we have several kinds of possible strategies. The one we have been using for years is a pyramidal strategy, step up. First flare, we use sometimes antibiotics, 5-ASA, but then steroids. And then in case of relapse, we may introduce immunosuppressants because of steroid dependency. And then in case of failure, we can use combinations with anti-TNF. There was a new concept almost 10 years ago, proposed by people from Netherlands and Belgium, suggesting that we should do it differently. We should maybe treat strongly from the beginning. So it was an early treatment with anti-TNF and immunosuppressants of a top-down strategy. In fact, it's not really a top-down because when you do that, it's more rectangle than a pyramidal because people do not stop anti-TNF. So what we have been doing more and more in our clinical practice is that for some patients we use a rapid accelerated step care, meaning introducing early immunosuppressants and anti-TNF because we want to be sure that we control the disease. I should say that we should not do the same for all patients, and one difficult task in IBD, in the management of IBD patients, is to be able to predict the course of the disease, and for sure we should not use always the most intensive treatment to every patient because it is clear that approximately 30% of Crohn's patients have a mild course of disease. 50% of UC patients have a very good prognosis with 5-ASA only. So, of course, we should not use immunosuppressants and anti-TNF and biologics in all patients. We have learned also that if we are able to obtain mucosal healing, it may be better for the course of the disease later. Here it's data showing that from SONIC again, the rate of mucosal healing, so complete absence of ulceration, so it's really a strong mucosal healing, and this is a rate 44% at 6 months. We have also data showing that adalimumab is able to, like other drugs, to induce mucosal healing. And we know from several studies that mucosal healing is associated with a better outcome. Here is just data from Scandinavia showing that in ulcerative colitis and in Crohn's disease, showing that patients who had obtained mucosal healing had a lower risk of colectomy in UC as opposed to patients who did not get the mucosal healing 1 year after treatment. And the same for Crohn's disease. So there are many data showing that if you obtain mucosal healing, then it's better for the course of the disease. So this is shown in clinical trials. So there is a concept which appeared, which is a treat to target, and I will not go deeply through that. Just the idea is that when we treat patients, probably we should not only focus on clinical symptoms, but probably also look at biological markers to be sure that we control the disease. And sometimes also maybe we should check about the endoscopy or radiology to be sure that we control the disease. And this is probably important in patients with extensive disease and where there is a risk of disability if the disease still progresses. So the idea in this is to define a target, you treat, and you want to check that you reach the target. And if you have reached the target, then you continue the treatment, and you can eventually desescalate. And if you don't reach the target, then you need to optimize the treatment. So this is a concept in other diseases, which is interesting. We may use it, but it has not been proved yet that it is useful for patients. So what is the best target? Again, clinical remission, normalization of biomarkers, endoscopic healing, and potentially in the future, having new biologics. We will be we will want to have better results, and we may show one day that histological remission and even molecular remission, if we are able to change the pattern of the disease, could be better for the patient for the long term. And the question would be, using these drugs, what will be if there is a fight one day? It would be that maybe some of these drugs will do better than the others to go until this objective. So there will be a lot of work to do to have all this knowledge, and I don't know if we will have the knowledge one day. So this is a good side, the efficacy of the anti-TNF and the efficacy of the biologics. But in real life, in fact, results are not so great. Anti-TNF fails in many patients. And globally, if you look at the long term, it's 50% of patients who do not have a long-term benefit with anti-TNF. So many patients 1/3 do not have a primary response. It depends if you look at cohorts or clinical trials. Even if you have a response, 50% of patients during the first year have a loss of response, meaning that the treatment must be optimized. And in fact, every year there is a percentage of patients who have to stop the treatment because they have a complete loss of efficacy. So in clinical practice, when the patient loses the response, we must think about, because there are pitfalls, we must be sure that there is still active disease. Sometimes patients have symptoms which are not related to active disease. And this may be related to complications such as abscess, fistula, strictures, malignancy. And we had patients who develop malignancy, symptoms come back, and we are not sure, and this occurred in my practice with patients with perianal lesions who developed cancer of the anal region. And we thought it was loss of response. No, it was a malignancy. So there are some very important aspects to consider in this situation. Infections, Clostridium difficile is important to think and to check in many situations. Then if there is a full loss of response, complete failure, we have to think about other options. It's not only focusing about biologics, because for many patients we can find other solutions, like giving back some immunosuppressants, like etiopurines, methotrexate, which is a very interesting drug. We may consider to give other biologics, but this is mainly for clinical trials now. And in some very specific situations, we had to discuss hematopoietic stem cell transplantation. I will not have time to discuss that, but this is restricted to patients with very severe refractory disease. We can consider to do hematopoietic stem cell transplantation. So switching in class, meaning that one anti-TNF is failure, we can give another anti-TNF. And this works. This is a randomized trial with adalimumab, GAIN, and which shows that you have higher rate of response with adalimumab as compared to placebo. And globally, we can say that when you switch to another, you have 1/3 of patients who are in remission, and globally. And we did a study in the GTED on a third line of anti-TNF with 2 previous failures. It could be infliximab, adalimumab, or certolizumab pegol, and then switching to the other one. And we could see that, in fact, in clinical practice, there is a percentage of patients which may benefit even for a third anti-TNF. So we know that we can switch to other anti-TNF. And we know that also from rheumatologists. Here, it's a new anti-TNF which is coming on the market, and I think I heard that you have it in Greece now. Yeah? So it's golimumab, and here are the results of the trial with golimumab in ulcerative colitis. And the data are from Pursuit, and for patients who were naive to anti-TNF. And here are the results, which I think are comparable to the results obtained with the other anti-TNF. So now, switching out of class, meaning considering other biologics. So we may think about these targets, and I will develop essentially activation, regulation of immune response, and adhesion, migration of immune cells. And I will focus on monoclonal antibodies and small molecules. So I already discussed this slide, so I think I can go through. And for cytokine production, we can look at the cytokines produced by T cells. So we know that it's a knowledge from immunology that CD4 T cells, there are different subsets, different function, and we can classify the different type of T cells on the type of cytokines they produce. It's a way to differentiate cells. So we know that there are CD4 T cells, we have regulatory functions, they produce regulatory cytokines like IL-10, TGF-beta. And these cells are very important in the gut because the gut is a place of tolerance of the immune system towards the intestinal microbiota. And there are also effector T cells. We have known for many times that there are Th1 cells. They are characterized by interferon gamma productions under the activity of IL-12. These were well defined in Crohn's disease. In ulcerative colitis, it's more a Th2 type which has been described, producing especially IL-13, IL-5. It's why sometimes we have UC patients who have eosinophilia because IL-5 is activating eosinophils. So this is more in UC. And we have learned that, in fact, there is also other cell types, T cells, which produce IL-17. And it's interesting to see that IL-23, an IL-23 receptor is expressed on these cells, is independent, is a function of these cells, and the IL-23 receptor is a gene susceptibility for IBD, but also for other immune-mediated inflammatory disorders. So the idea was to think about targeting these different cytokines, Th1, Th17. So we have data with ustekinumab. And ustekinumab is an antibody which targets the P40 subunit of IL-12 and IL-23. When you use this monoclonal antibody, you block both IL-12 and IL-23, so Th1 and Th17 cells. So this was a trial published 5 years ago, the first trial, phase 2, showing that, in fact, ustekinumab here in this trial at 8 weeks did not reach the primary endpoint. What was interesting in this study, was that patients who were previously exposed to anti-TNF had much better results. So it was a post-hoc analysis. And this led to this trial, CERTiFy, which is a study with ustekinumab in refractory Crohn's disease in patients who have a TNF antagonist failure history. And you can see here that really many patients have failures with all anti-TNF, and many patients with several anti-TNF. So it's really a refractory population. And the results are positive. It shows here the rate of clinical response at week 6, so this is for induction. And you see that there is a higher rate of clinical response as compared to placebo at week 6 and also at week 8. Clinical remission at week 6 was also was not significant here at week 6. For some, it was significant. No, it was not even at week 8. Here are the data on maintenance with ustekinumab, and showing here with the maintenance of ustekinumab the rate of clinical response and the loss of response with placebo. And here the rate of clinical response. So globally, a good rate of maintenance of clinical response on these short periods of 22 weeks. So ustekinumab is an interesting drug. There is a specific situation where we can use it. It's when patients develop paradoxical inflammation, psoriatic lesions, and we know that this type of lesions produce a lot of IL-17. Ustekinumab is very efficient in psoriasis. So the idea is to use in patients who are refractory to anti-TNF and develop psoriasis to use ustekinumab, and this works very well. So it's a situation where we have been using already ustekinumab because patients have severe psoriasis. So this is a negative trial, but I show it, not completely negative, but not positive enough. It's the same target, but with another antibody. So this shows that if you define a target, the P40 subunit, sometimes an antibody will work, but another one from another company will not work as well. And this is data that we should remember, is the fact that if you target IL-17 alone, IL-17A or IL-17 receptor, in fact, it does not work, and it's even worse than that. It's bad for the disease. You have more manifestations in patients receiving the treatment as compared to placebo. And this is probably important for us. You know why? Because dermatologists use this anti-IL-17A and IL-17 receptor. Many patients have psoriasis and IBD, and we may expect that there will be some case, and there are already some case, I think, it's a rumor, of patients developing IBD under this anti-TNF. So if you have dermatologist colleague, patients treated with some biologic for their psoriasis, think about this kind of possible scenario. Other cytokines, I will go very quickly. There is just some negative rumors about targeting IL-13 in UC. Not a rumor only, there is a negative trial presented recently at UEGW. And I would like just to say a word, I'm sorry, it's about immunology, but that's one of the fields that I like, so I cannot avoid to do it. I'm sorry for those who are refractory to immunology. You know that when a T cell is activated, this is a T cell, this is an antigen-presenting cell. When a T cell is activated, it has to recognize through the T cell receptor the antigen which is presented by an MHC molecule. And in fact, when a T cell recognizes an antigen, this is not enough to activate the T cells. The T cells to be activated need other signals, co-stimulatory signals. One which is very well known is CD28. which give a positive activation. Here is a counterbalance, CTLA4, which give a negative activation. I go back to what I said previously. Patients who are treated with antibodies targeting CTLA4 for cancer, especially for melanoma, 20% of them develop colitis. That shows that if you play with T cells, if you overactivate T cells because you want to act on a cancer, you may have the downside will be that you will activate the immune system and induce immune-mediated inflammatory disorders. So there are drugs targeting CD28, and there is a very good drug in other immune-mediated inflammatory disorders, especially rheumatoid arthritis, abatacept. It was tried in IBD. It doesn't work at all. And one reason potentially is that, in fact, activation of T cells in the gut is different of what I previously showed. This is I'm convinced of that. That's the area I'm doing my research. And in fact, there are other pathways of activation for T cells in the gut. One reason is that the epithelium plays a key role in the activation of T cells in the gut. Okay. There is many immunologists will not believe it, but that's my belief. So since I speak, I say it. So we have this found in my lab. We found that there are a subset of CD4 cells which are activated by epithelial cells and which express an NK receptor, which is NKG2D. And this NK receptor is potentially very important. And we found CD4 cells expressing NKG2D only in Crohn's disease, not in ulcerative colitis. These cells have effector functions, TNF producer, Th1 and Th17 pathways, and also they are able to kill, even if they are CD4, to kill epithelial cells. They have there are oligoclonal expansions in this subset, and there is a trial which has been performed and which will be presented at next DDW targeting this NKG2D pathway. And this is interesting because it's something targeting especially immune response in the gut. Now, small molecules. There is another important molecule which is in trials right now, which is tofacitinib. And this is a positive trial in ulcerative colitis. So this is interesting for patients because this is not a monoclonal antibody. This is pills. So some patients may prefer that. And here you can see the rate of clinical response with tofacitinib, which are really, really good. Rates of clinical remission and rates of endoscopic healing. And with the dose of 10 milligrams per day was the best optimal dose for mucosal healing in ulcerative colitis. So I think that this drug is interesting. There may be problems with the safety profile, especially in RA. This drug did not reach the market yet because of the safety profile. So we need to learn more about this. Just to tell about how this molecule works, tofacitinib, in fact, it blocks JAK3 pathway, JAK1 and JAK3 pathway, and JAK3 is important for the signaling through receptors of these cytokines which are players in inflammatory bowel disease, both in Crohn's and in UC actually. So these small molecules, tofacitinib, could be one of the treatments which we may use in the future. Now, one of the major targets is the endothelium, adhesion molecules. You know that T cells, to be recruited in the gut, they need to adhere to the endothelium, and this occurs through integrins, alpha-4 beta-7 here, which is specific for the ligand MAdCAM, which is expressed only in the gut endothelium. So here we have an antibody or antibodies which may target this interaction. And what is interesting is that it is specific to the gut, as opposed to a previous treatment which was natalizumab, well working, but this drug could be responsible of very serious infections, PML, leukoencephalopathy. So this drug is really targeted to the gut. So hopefully, and so far, there is no signs of JC virus infections and PML which could occur with this drug. So safety seems to be good. Here are the results of the study Gemini-1 in ulcerative colitis, showing, so these are the clinical response, remission, and mucosal healing at week 6. And it shows here very interesting results in terms of induction, especially with mucosal healing in ulcerative colitis. And this is the results through week 52. And this suggests that this drug is a good drug to maintain remission in ulcerative colitis. In Crohn's, so this is a safety profile. So far, there is no signal of clear adverse event, to my knowledge. Vedolizumab in Crohn's disease. The results are also positive here in terms of clinical remission at week 6, not significant for clinical response. Very low rates of clinical remission, but we know that with many biologics now, maybe probably because patients are refractory, they came late. We don't know if naive patients would have better results, but it's true that it's very low. But clinical remission at week 6, it's maybe too early to see the total benefit. Here, the clinical remission at week 52, and there is also a significant difference in Crohn's disease with placebo. And this is the maintenance. So what is interesting is that there is a good maintenance of this treatment over time, over the first year. So vedolizumab is clearly a drug which we may use in the near future. I think maybe next year it will be on the market. So then the question will be, we will use these drugs in case of anti-TNF failure or in case of, in competition with anti-TNF. So just now I'm about to finish about the summary of the pipeline. This is not exactly, so I made it myself from a previous figure which was made by Silvio Danese in Gut, very nice figure, but I wanted to highlight, to make it differently. Here are the anti-TNF. Some possibilities of oral anti-TNF which are in development. TNF kininoid, which is a vaccination, but gave a negative result in trial, but it was not fully negative. We will have the question about biosimilars. I don't know if you use them already, but there are already biosimilars of infliximab and anti-TNF. We have this family of cells targeting the migration. Not only vedolizumab anti-alpha-4, there is also another antibody. This is from Takeda. From Amgen, another antibody also targeting alpha-4 beta-7, which is in clinical trials now. There is also an anti-MAdCAM, which is the same family. MAdCAM is a ligand of alpha-4 beta-7. So it's the same target, in fact, globally. And I think these three drugs are very interesting. There is another one here which is not well known, which is etrolizumab in ulcerative colitis, not targeting alpha-4 beta-7, but beta-7 only. It's interesting because it will target the recruitment to the tissue, but also the activation, because beta-7 is also linked to alpha-E, and it's an integrin interaction, important for interaction with the epithelium. Anti-NKG2D, which is in phase 2A. Tofacitinib I discussed already in development for ulcerative colitis, and also in Crohn's, the development is ongoing. And this family of anti-IL-12, anti-IL-23, so ustekinumab, which has shown efficacy, which is in development, and negative results with targeting IL-17A and IL-17 receptor, and even worse, worsening of the course of the disease. So just to summarize, anti-TNF have a great efficacy. This has been a revolution in our practice. However, they have some limits, some adverse events like paradoxical inflammation, some failures. New biologics are mainly used in case of anti-TNF failures so far in clinical trials and sometimes in clinical practice. But for sure, we'll have the possibility to use them in first line in the near future. And we should focus results on mechanism of failure. We should try to understand why an anti-TNF is not working. Is it due to immunogenicity? Is it due to other inflammatory pathways? And I do think that there are other inflammatory pathways. So patients with distinct physiopathology, there is heterogeneity. There is also another concept, which is the progression of the time. Maybe some drugs may be more efficient at some timing in the course of the disease. So we need to develop also prediction markers. So treat to target, that may be the thing which will be difficult to explore. We believe that some of these biologics and others which are in development may be better than others to go to a kind of molecular remission which could allow a long-term remission even without treatment if it's possible, like if we are able to reset the immune system. I would like to just to finish my slide, just saying that there is an interesting meeting in France in May, Falk Symposium. I found this slide of think outside of the box because people tell me, what does it mean? I think this explains clearly what it means here. It's a nice picture. Again, I would like to thank you for this invitation, and I will be very pleased to answer to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mathieu, for giving us this excellent overview of the topic of the old and new biological therapies. And also we thank you for sharing with us some of your secrets of immunology and very nice slides of what's going on and what we have to expect in the next years. I would like to stay you in the podium and θα ήθελα να σας παρακαλέσω αν υπάρχουν κάποιες ερωτήσεις. Κύριος Κουτρουμπάκης.
Thank you, Matthew, for coming and giving us this excellent presentation. I would like to ask you, what about possible combination of biologics in the future? We know now that the best treatment is the combo anti-TNF and AZA, but AZA has some problems. Some new data put some doubts about the use of AZA. In the future, how do you see the combination of the possible combination of biologics?
I think that for pharmacological reasons, it will not be possible to combine different monoclonal antibodies. Because when you combine different monoclonal antibodies, you will change the clearance of the antibodies. Because, for example, there is an Fc receptor, the FcRn receptor, which protect antibodies from catabolism. So probably, I don't know, I'm not aware of, even in rheumatology, because they are pioneers many times, of combination of monoclonal antibodies. I don't think it will be possible, because we will increase the clearance of the antibodies. We may, in the future, think about, companies will not like that, but using some drugs in some situations, some antibodies in situation, and other in other situations. There will be some niche, like the post-operative situation, I don't know. Combination being maybe between small molecules and monoclonal antibodies. I think it's still in our practice today with anti-TNF to combine with immunosuppressants is really something I think which is clear, at least in my mind. And I use more and more methotrexate, for example, because I am also concerned about the safety of thiopurines as you are.
Αν υπάρχει κάποια άλλη ερώτηση, παρακαλώ. Δεν βλέπω κάποια άλλη ερώτηση. Mathieu, please allow me one question. Do we have always to follow our friends rheumatologists because they are more lucky than us? They have about 10 biologicals available, but we, at the moment in Greece, we have 2 available. Do you feel we have to target another group of molecules or different molecular targets instead of following?
Yeah, it's
a company game also and what is available in the market, but from the immunological point of view, do you think we have differences from rheumatology and the drugs to be developed?
So it's a very good question. I think there are some situations where it's obvious. For example, anti-alpha-4, beta-7, anti-MADCAM, they are restricted to the gut. We don't know actually if these drugs work for extraintestinal manifestations. It will be interesting to have data on that. So for these, of course, it cannot be used in rheumatoid arthritis, in psoriasis even. But even for targeting some immune events in the gut, I talked about NKG2D. This is, I think, more specific to the gut. And because the gut environment is very special, there is this antigen load with the microbiota, billions of bacteria and antigens, so that the activation is clearly different in the gut as compared to other. Potentially, in the future, specialists in the gut immunology will help to develop for other immune disease. For example, there are data now showing in multiple sclerosis that events in the gut with the bacteria, with the microbiota, and probably with immune response. So some targets in the gut may be interesting for other immune-mediated inflammatory disorders. But it's a very good question because companies now are more focused on, they develop a treatment, they try it in RA because it's a bigger market, and with more promise if they work. And if they don't work, they will not go to IBD. But maybe it's not a good idea for some specific pathways.
Αν δεν υπάρχει ερώτηση, να κλείσουμε εδώ τη συνεδρία. Thank you very much again for coming. And just a small present for memory of your talk and your coming here. Thank you.